Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today, the show is about the Forgiveness Institute. Can you believe it? There is an institute to help people forgive. Isn't that what we need? And that's precisely what's happening on the earth. And we're so happy about it. Happy because that's what the world needs. Many problems happen everywhere and elsewhere, like things we have been seeing, like yesterday in New York, the shooting. I mean, why do people have that? The inability to forgive? What is happening to us? There are ways to learn to forgive. If we forgive, life is much better. We're going to learn more about it. Is it possible? How is it possible? So we're going to have here Dr. Mac Hardin and Patricia Plum. They're going to be here with us talking about it. They are the founders and the president of the Forgiveness Institute. We have a lot to share with you about them. But before we get there, we want to share with you that there are major events happening in the United States. And September 8th and 9th, there is the Sixth Spiritist Educators Workshop in Bethel, Connecticut, and it's going to be led by one of our members of Kardec Radio team, Bernadette Leal, Master in Education. She's going to lead a whole workshop, 2-day workshop, on how to teach Spiritist teachings to kids and youth. Amazing. Just go to the Allan Kardec Spirit Society of Connecticut, their website. You get to know more about the information. Also, November 10th, the whole day, which is going to be a beautiful day, is going to be the 15 years of the United States Spiritist Council in a beautiful event entitled Immortal Beings on an Earthly Journey. And the guest speaker is the renowned Haroldo Dutra Dias. Amazing, many big events, and you can get to know more about these events at the website of the United States Spiritist Council, spiritist.us. Don't miss it. By the way, our sister radio, web online radio, Bezerra Online, is transmitting live programs and also on demand by Kardec Radio at spiritist.com. And you can listen to other programs, not only in English, but in Portuguese and in Spanish. It's amazing. It's in the beautiful network of radios connected also to our dear radio in Colombia. And, there's a lot happening. And if you want to spend a beautiful day by nature in a park, come tomorrow. The Spirit Side of Baltimore is hosting a beautiful fundraiser at the park, enjoying good, healthy food, day at the park, activities. And you're welcome to come. Just visit the website of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore at www.ssbaltimore.org. And this coming Wednesday, the Spirit Society of Virginia is screening the amazing movie about the greatest mediums of our time, Chico Xavier. And you can come to our event at 7:30 p.m. and get to know people, enjoy it, watch the movie, and get to know more about what Spiritism is all about. So right now, we want to talk about forgiveness. And why is it so important? As Allan Kardec said in the Spirit's book, when he asked the question 886, what is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it? And the loving and kind spiritual minds, they answered, benevolence towards everyone, indulgence towards the imperfections of others, and forgiveness for offenses. That's all we need. Forgiveness for offenses. Are we ready? Well, we're going to learn that you can learn it. If you're not prone to it, you can learn it. How? Well, we have experts here in the show. Dr. Mac Hardin, he is a Senior Vice President at Organizational Consulting with Right Management. He has been working in this field for more than 30 years. He was the founder and director of the Christian Counseling Center in Lawrence, Kansas in 1985, and he is also a graduate of the United States Military Academy, and he was also a Vietnam veteran. And in the global outreach, he has pioneered conflict management and resolution, focusing on the forgiveness process. He directed the first National Convention on Forgiveness in 1993 and has been working in the field since then. He helped found the Forgiveness Institute and has been working with many people, and he was, this past May, when we actually met him, at the 6th U.S. Spiritist meeting, the symposium in Atlanta, Georgia, as he is good friends with Dr. Mark Baker. We were honored by his presence. A very special event occurred that very day and time when we were having lunch with him and Dr. Mark Baker and Carlos Diaz, and we were delighted to know that he was there honoring us with his presence and sharing much. Today he's going to share much more with us. And we also have here the honor to have Patricia Plumb. She is a specialist in professional development, has been working as a leadership consultant also for Fortune 500 company. And she has been helping in the mental health and education field for families, adolescents, and children. She has a bachelor's degree and a master's in education from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and she also has a master's degree in theology. And she is involved in the Forgiveness Institute over the last 17 years, working on forgiveness, reconciliation. She's actually the current president of the Institute. We are so honored to have them here, and to kickstart the program in the highest tone, we're going to share with you a beautiful message from the CD and book Living and Loving by Joana de Angelis through the medium Divaldo Franco. You can buy this book and CD at the bookstore of the Spirit Side of Baltimore at www.ssbaltimore.org/bookstore. Listen to this. It's about optimism. When we give our first break, soon after, we're going to bring Dr. Mac Harnden and Patricia Plumb.
Chapter 6. Keep Your Optimism.
The dispirited companion who walks by your side may be facing a crucial ordeal. That friend of yours who slipped into delinquency may have tried hard to avoid crime. The other one who succumbed to vice may have fought against it but was not strong enough. The co-worker who discontinued service might have tried to stay in his place but was unable to comply. The friend who suddenly became your enemy may not have been able to overcome his pernicious tendencies. People acting negatively need understanding rather than criticism. Some might have wished to act differently but could not help themselves. A few others may be secretly trying to fight their negative drives. Many may have already acted as anonymous heroes but are now in disgrace. All of them need a new opportunity to prove themselves, that they can change their behavior. They may never ask for help. Still, they should be given a new chance. Consider the positive side of people's actions and forget their weaknesses. Do not reject them. It is easy to fraternize with nice and diligent people always willing to cooperate and serve. It is agreeable to enjoy the company of worthy persons. But they also have problems of which you probably know nothing about. The earth is both a school and a hospital for unhealthy souls. Nobody living on earth now is an exception from this rule. It is useless to seek the company of angels since they are not incarnate on earth now. All people on this planet bear the same characteristics as yourself. They suffer, have their own limitations, and they want to live in peace, and they dream with happiness. Try not to comment on the deficiency of others. If you cannot help them, keep silent and excuse them when they hurt you. Do not be disheartened by their behavior. If you know what you are looking for and are willing to serve, go on acting as you know best, and be gentle to all who come your way. Do not harbor grief or disappointment within your heart. Be an optimist. Help those who have gone astray back to the right road. Abandoned and betrayed, Jesus was never disheartened. Never did he display resentment. He was the great winner of all the battles that life reserved for him.
We will return to our program after these messages. Do you find yourself with no time to stop and read or meditate about Spiritism or spirituality? We have a great solution for you. The audio CD called Unfolding Our Spiritual Nature, Path of Harmony by Ra Tashira is an enlightening CD with a question and answer session as well. Feel the enrichment and purchase your copy today at www.ssbaltimore.org. Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Learn more about indigo and crystal children with the book The New Generation, The Spiritist View on Indigo and Crystal Children by Devoto Franco with Vanessa Anzalone. Whether you're a parent or not, this book will enrich your mind. Go to www.ssbaltimore.org and click on Bookstore and purchase your copy today.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral, digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Now we return to our program.
The Forgiveness Institute, can you believe it? We cannot believe it. It's so amazing, and moreover, the idea in itself, dear friends and listeners, is amazing, because imagine, a while ago, people didn't have it. They didn't even talk about it. We know forgiveness is not an easy task, and people often have a misconception that to forgive is to forget, and neuroscience already proves that it's impossible to forget, because adaptively we need to remember. But how do we forgive then? In the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, we got to know that it's charity. To forgive is also charity. So we need to forgive. And Jesus extensively recommended it. And people didn't understand, and probably to date, people still don't understand. For some people, it's outrageous to think about forgiveness. And how many lives are being taken away because we lack forgiveness? Our own lives, because we keep hatred in our hearts, because we hold grudges, and also sometimes dramatic cases, tragedies, just like the one we heard about yesterday in New York. A man who couldn't forgive his co-worker and simply killed him and got himself killed. It's tragic. And many families go through a similar problem. How about us? How can we deal with forgiveness? Probably we need help, and there are people here to help us. And that's why we're opening the line right now for our dear founders and coordinators of the Forgiveness Institute in the United States, Patricia Plumb and Dr. Mac Harnden. Thank you so much, both of you, for being with us at Kardec Radio today.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so exciting. How did this idea about the Forgiveness Institute come about?
Well, it actually began on April 20th of 1985. I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, attending a conference sponsored by the Christian Association for Psychological Studies, and the speaker was Lewis Smedes. And as I began to listen to his talk on forgiveness, I realized that the word and the process of forgiveness, even though foundational to many faiths, more particularly the Christian and the Jewish faith, that very little research and very few books and articles have been actually written on the process of forgiveness. And so when I came back to Lawrence, Kansas, where I was living, I went to the University of Kansas Library and looked up in what was called at that time psychological abstracts, which listed the research that had been published in the behavioral sciences. Mm-hmm. And there was no topic of forgiveness listed. And that then became a catalyst to start organizing some small workshops around the subject of forgiveness. And even though we were interested in kind of the religious component of forgiveness, we really were really trying to understand the interpersonal aspects of forgiveness. And people use the word forgiveness, for example, in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. But I was just amazed that as I reflected back on my own kind of Christian upbringing, I never heard a sermon, never heard a Sunday school class on how do you forgive. It was always forgive, but they never taught us how. And then I had a PhD in clinical psychology, and during my training at the University of Kansas, I don't recall any teacher or professor, any workshop that was trying to encourage a therapist to help facilitate forgiveness on the part of clients. And so I was shocked. And so that then eventually led to forming the Forgiveness Institute.
That's amazing, because as you're saying, we now have evidence that it's possible to learn it, because some people say, I cannot forgive, but based on what you're proposing, we can learn it, right?
Yes, we definitely can.
Okay, and then, but though science has evidences, but as you said, is there a program? So the Institute, what does the Institute do? It's like the main mission is to...
The main mission of the Forgiveness Institute is we seek to equip and encourage leaders of all different faiths and cultures and traditions and positions to live more forgiving and merciful lives. Leaders are really encouraged to do that also.
And how does that work? Are there programs and people go take workshops? Are they online? How does it happen?
Our work has been predominantly with conferences, both nationally and international conferences. And we've discussed the possibilities of doing some other items too, but the main principal vehicle is using different symposiums to really promote that and for there to be discussion and for people to have a chance to talk about the different challenges in their own lives and how they face it. And, there's also something very important, too, in forgiveness. What you brought up is that there are times where we can forgive people, but recognize at the same time that we are seeking to see how do we provide ways to reconcile and ways to resolve the issues so that there's a real genuine spirit of forgiveness. And as we discuss in our faith how Jesus as the Messiah came and demonstrated that for us, that in spite of all the things that people had done wrong in the way of sin and our sin nature, then that Jesus was able to be our Messiah and to take on the penalty for any of those times that we would be sinning or not being really the perfect ideal, loving people that God intended to be. So our desire, though, is to help people to see that, to focus on it, and to see ways to resolve it, too.
That's amazing. Yes.
I might say that we really have kind of partnered with other organizations. For example, the first national conference on forgiveness took place in Kansas City in 1993. And this really was the first time really in history, as far as we know, where there was really a gathering of people to look at all the different aspects of forgiveness, ranging from forgiving oneself to experiencing forgiveness from God, to nations considering, forgiving each other for wars. And we had over 50 different presentations of different aspects of the impact of forgiving or not forgiving at that conference. And then in December of 1999, we partnered with an organization called the International Fellowship that supports the U.S. Congress for the National Prayer Breakfast, and we had an event that started in Amman, Jordan, under the auspices of King Abdullah, and then we, on Christmas Day, we bused from Amman, Jordan to Jerusalem, and we completed our conference in Jerusalem with Ehud Olmert, who later became Prime Minister of Israel, and Leah Rabin, whose husband was assassinated when he was Prime Minister, and then Itzhak, and then Shimon Peres, who currently is the president, not the Prime Minister, but the president of Israel. He also spoke. So we also had the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi there. So we really were wanting to look at how forgiveness is viewed from different cultures, different perspectives, but the ultimate goal was to encourage people, whether they believed that Jesus was the Messiah or not, to embrace his teachings, because they lead to good, psychological, healthy, and reconcilable lives.
Exactly. You're so right. And it's amazing, the first national convention in 93, I heard about it, I read on your website, and I think we probably need more of these conventions to really, as you're saying, people talk about it, but they don't teach people about practical ways in which we can achieve it.
I might just give you again a little bit more history. We were the first time to bring people together to focus on this. Simultaneously, if we go back to 1985, Bob Enright at the University of Wisconsin was also very interested in the process of forgiveness, and so he then became the leading researcher in the world in terms of the different processes of forgiveness, and he's written a couple books. One is called Forgiveness is the Choice, that was published in 2001. And then Bob had the second national conference on forgiveness in 1995 at the University of Wisconsin. And then Fred de Blasio had the third national conference at the University of Maryland in Baltimore, and I think that was in 1997 or 98. Then the Templeton Foundation became very interested in forgiveness, and so they initiated a very large grant and research project that was overseen by Everett Worthington, who's a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. And the total amount of money, I think, that was raised to do research through the Templeton Foundation and from other resources was about $10 million.
Wow.
And so out of that, of course, Stanford, Harvard, and some of the other major universities developed their own research initiatives on forgiveness. So from 1985 until the present, there's been a tremendous amount of publications, of research, of workshops on the subject of forgiveness, and therefore we thought, well, maybe we need to look at mercy and see if there's a difference between mercy and forgiveness. And so we wanted to have a conference on the subject of mercy in Atlanta in February of 2011. Mark Baker was going to be one of our speakers, but due to a variety of circumstances, we weren't able to have that. So our hope, as we look toward the future, is that we can have some additional conferences on forgiveness, mercy, and now there's interest in the subject of generosity or interpersonal generosity, with forgiveness being a component of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, there are so many elements, so many features, right? And when we talk about forgiveness, people want to know more about how do we actually break down practical steps. Have you, in the organization, the Forgiveness Institute, envisioned practical ways in which people can learn? Because there are some people that are more predisposed to forgiveness and others aren't. Correct?
Yes. I'll start answering your question, and Patty can add to that. Let me introduce these steps by basically saying there has to be some awareness, that unforgiveness is not healthy. I was having lunch with a high school friend of mine 2 days ago, and he was talking about this grudge he had with a friend for years, and eventually led to this friend taking a gun and trying to kill him. And fortunately, the bullet went to his side, and of course that perpetuated the hostility. And eventually, he said, "The poison that I am drinking is not going to kill him." Okay, in other words, unforgiveness, the poison that I think is going to kill him, I'm drinking it. And so Lewis Smedes summarized this by the following. He said, "Forgiveness is the key that can unshackle from a past that will not rest in the grave of things over and done with. As long as our minds are captive to the memory of having been wronged, they are not free to wish for reconciliation with the one who wronged us." And so we really are in bondage when we don't forgive. So the first step is really awareness. And then, and part of that awareness is the recognition that, hey, I've been hurt, I've been treated unfairly, and so you have to own that, and in contrast to denying that an abuse has taken place. And a lot of individuals who have been sexually abused, as we know, they go into a state of denial, and they really almost forget that it's ever happened. So awareness is step number one. Number two is then owning the anger that comes with the recognition that someone has hurt me, they have treated me unfairly. The third step is gathering information, trying to find out why, gathering the data, the history, particularly the history of the person who wronged us. And then you move into a decision that I'm going to choose to forgive, and then you reframe it. You try to understand through the history of that other person's eyes the rationale for why they hurt us, and you reframe it. And a way of reframing it would be that this person was misdirecting his anger towards me because his anger really was towards somebody else that had hurt him or hurt her in the past. And once you do the reframing, then you're in a position to emotionally and behaviorally release the desire to get even, to retaliate, and ultimately the ideal is to eventually wish that person well.
So you're talking about, Mac, a process that would be, you need a lot of reasoning. So you have to regain reason, really, to go through the steps, because many people, we know, they don't even go to step number one, which is awareness, because they often dismiss it by saying, forgive the person, but I don't want to talk about it.
Exactly.
Right? So they don't even acknowledge that what they're experiencing is like the identification of that feeling. It's like they don't acknowledge that what they're feeling is in need of forgiveness.
Right, and there are times where people will just deny it and then continue in relationship, but it's more superficial because there's never that discussion about what has taken place and that resolve to do things differently and to apologize. And so at that point, then things are superficial, and then you can see when sometimes people may be upset later because it has never really been discussed, or they may acted out in some other way that is troubling for them and for the other person too.
Exactly, and we're talking about a thing. We're going to go for a break, but when we come back, we'd like to hear from you on more about the steps and the benefits versus the hardships of keeping a heart encapsulated in unforgiveness, but also when this unforgiveness happens even in spiritual organizations. Okay, we're going to go for a short break. When we come back, we're going to discuss this and much more.
Okay.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The International Spiritist Council is organizing and promoting the 7th World Spiritist Congress, which will be held in Havana, Cuba on March 23rd through the 25th of 2013. The Congress theme will be Charity and Spiritual Education in Building a World of Peace. 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism. For more information, please visit www.7cem.org.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit Mei, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listeners, we're talking about the Forgiveness Institute, an amazing initiative, and we have here with us the founders, the current main directors of the organization, Patricia Plumb and Dr. Mac Harnden. And Dr. Mac Harnden, we had a great experience at the 6th U.S. Spiritist Symposium as he came there, as he is a good friend and collaborator with Dr. Mark Baker, also a great collaborator for us in the Spiritist movement. And we had a great experience that lunchtime, right, Mac? We want to tell the listener because it was quite amazing as we were having lunch. And suddenly a homeless stopped by, and it was fascinating, the experience. And he came along with us to the meeting. You remember that, right?
Yes, I sure do. And I remember how generous you were in sharing part of your lunch with him.
No, and you did too. It was amazing. It was a team effort. And we just felt so compelled. And he was so special because he was joyful. And I tell you, at the end of the conference, he not only came along to give us a hug, but he wrote us a message of gratitude. It's amazing. I've never seen that in a million years because usually homeless people are they are struggling so much. But you could tell he had such an open heart.
Wow.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. So as we are talking about opening our hearts, Patricia and Mac, we were just talking about people who keep their hearts closed to forgiveness. And sometimes we see very spiritual people, or they claim to be very spiritual or religious, who also go through the same route. Why do you think this happens?
Well, many times people are brought up in families that are told that they're not to talk about their feelings. They grow up in homes that have been abusive or where there's alcoholic families, and so they're taught really to kind of protect whoever is the offender, and they have to bottle up all of those different feelings rather than talk about them, and they really don't learn how to properly or in a loving way be able to get beyond it. And so when people are still bound up with that type of upbringing, then it's difficult for people to even consider forgiveness because they don't even know it. It's like someone who's never known love, they don't know how to love.
Exactly. And as you were talking about this, we also realize that there are people who have a hard time forgiving, and instead of just keeping it to themselves, they begin a process of retaliation. There are so many ways they retaliate, and it's a form of aggression, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a great example of this, and this was published in a newspaper quite some time ago. Took place in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and it says for 2 years the mom and dad dedicated their lives to punishing the drunken driver who had killed their only child.
Wow.
And so for 2 years they're going to court, and when the person was in prison, they went to prison, and they followed him after he got out of prison to see if he was still drinking. And finally the mother said, the hate and the bitterness I was feeling was destroying me. I need to forgive Tommy to save myself. And so she made that decision. Well, Tommy then began to speak at Mothers Against Drunken Drivers, and so he started getting a reputation of talking about the dangers of drinking while driving. And so this mother went to hear him talk, and she went backstage, and he was on probation, and she smelled alcohol on his breath.
Oh.
That brought back all this anger and this desire to retaliate, and so they went back to court, and he was about ready to be put back in prison to begin serving a 10-year jail sentence. Well, she had a strong faith in the Lord and felt like that she wasn't living up to her faith, and so she and her husband went to the judge, and they said, would you release him under our oversight? And they brought him into their home, and
wow.
And eventually he turned his life over to Christ and changed his life, and so it's just a great example of how long it takes sometimes for a person to get to that point where they're so worn out from the hate and the anger that ultimately they say, hey, I'm giving up, and that eventually can lead to forgiveness and ideally reconciliation.
It's amazing, Mac, because you were also, as you talked previously about the hardships of war and how important it is. Nowadays, our world is not at peace at all, and we still have major conflicts going around. And is this initiative of the Forgiveness Institute also inspired in great part by your own experience as a veteran?
That's a good question. I think it must be more kind of unconscious. I was in Vietnam and did experience some combat there. I was there during the Tet Offensive when a lot of Vietnamese were killed and there were bodies strewn across the fields, and I observed and witnessed that. But to tell you the truth, I think that the major motivation really was realizing the lack of focus, of in-depth, rigorous research on the subject of forgiveness within the psychological community and within the Christian community. And so that really was the major motivation. In retrospect, it probably did have an influence.
So also, Patricia, do you have some numbers or a qualitative evaluation about the benefits of coaching people to forgiveness?
I don't have any right at this moment, and it's sometimes difficult to have quantitative results. So much of it is very subjective, and I don't know. I know that there is research that has been done, and I'm not. Which I say I don't have those numbers right handy or anything, but I know that it does make a huge difference. They've actually even come across the reality of how forgiveness can also play a difference in our biological responses and how it can lower blood pressure, and it is very much an important part of our world in all different facets. So.
Yeah, Bob Enright
might have other thoughts.
Bob Enright has done research with heart patients and took them through a protocol of forgiveness in the experimental group and then a control group that didn't, and it did have very positive physiological benefits to those that had heart disease.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, because this is one of the main diseases of the current times. So maybe forgiveness can save us a lot of trouble in our families and everywhere else. And what other stories have you had in your work in the Forgiveness Institute of people that really found a new way of living through the steps, or coaching other leaders to take that journey as well?
I think probably the most impressive story of how powerful forgiveness can be had to do with South Africa, when Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela formed this commission, this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I think it was, and if you recall, and I'm not an expert on this, but it's my understanding that when Nelson Mandela became president, and soon thereafter, individuals in South Africa who had committed atrocities could come forward, and if they were willing to admit it and acknowledge what they had done, if it was politically motivated, then they would be actually forgiven. And if they weren't willing to come forward within a certain period of time, that they were going to be prosecuted. And I think that it's had, at least I've heard firsthand from some people from South Africa, that this has had a tremendous influence in trying to bring the country out of the bigotry and the apartheid that held that country in bondage. So that really is the great example. And then there are other examples of women. I heard a woman talk that was living in Rwanda during the genocide there, and she and several women had to live in one bathroom for several weeks to avoid being slaughtered. And she's come out and has written a book on how she's been able to forgive those that actually killed her family.
Wow.
So the subject is clearly much more visible. The subject of forgiveness is clearly much more, on the stage right now, and I think it is motivating people to consider that as an option when they've been deeply hurt.
Exactly. And we now have a listener, Jay from Canada, who is here, and he has a question for you. So, hi, Jay. Thank you for being with us at Kardec Radio. How are you?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
All right. How is the weather in Canada today?
Oh, it's actually nice and sunny, a little bit cool outside, so it's good.
All right. Fall is coming, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, Jay. So here we have, feel free to ask your question to Mac and Patricia.
Mac, Patricia, thanks so much for letting me be a part of your show and answering my questions. My question is regarding forgiveness. Have you found a common point what forgiveness is? When you for all the stories and stuff like that, a common, spiritual point. And speaking of spirituality, do you bring that actually more into your foundation or what you're talking about forgiveness? Do you talk about even past life forgiveness or stuff like that too?
Heather, you want to address that or want me to?
Sure. Well, in the area of forgiveness, it seems like many times people need to have a chance to really speak to the healing of memories, those things that have been definite hurts and sometimes for many people terrible atrocities, and ways to be able to reframe it and to be able to look at it in a way that will bring healing to them. A particular story comes to mind, and I don't know if this really answers your question, but it's an example of kind of reframing it or how people sometimes go about that. When I used to counsel children in the schools, I had 2 children come to me in California, and they were from one of the African nations where there had been a lot of bloodshed and massacres and problems, and they had come to the States, and they weren't able to be with their parents anymore, but they were staying with someone else here in the States. And so I was working with one of the students who could barely speak English, and I said, well, now tell me, are you angry about any of these situations, or who are you angry at? And she drew this picture, and it was so remarkable for me. But she drew this picture, and it was a picture of a figure with horns and a tail, and it was of Satan. And she recognized that Satan was the one that was, making all these atrocities happen. That many times those things that happen that are from the evil spirits are really kind of using humans, that it's not flesh and blood that we are really interacting with, but really seeing how that Satan really is alive and well and seeking to harm people and harm relationships, etc. And so when you think about how our Christian faith is a part of that piece, it's very huge to recognize that the spirits really do make a difference in how we respond to each other, and to sometimes reframe it and recognize that people are kind of stuck in negative ways of dealing with life. And Mac, you may have another way of answering that.
In terms of like when I'm counseling people, and right now I do more kind of executive coaching than actual counseling in the therapeutic perspective, but I really try to listen to the individual's receptivity to viewing, forgiveness and reconciliation from a spiritual perspective, because I think there is clearly the psychological perspective, just like how people deal with depression or they deal with, anxiety. Unforgiveness, is another psychological disruption in their life. But there are some situations that are so severe that I personally believe that it does require God's power to help a person really get over that hurdle from a state of unforgiveness to forgiveness. And so in that sense, I would introduce the subject of asking or suggesting the person if they would consider asking God to empower them to forgive.
Exactly. And Jay, if you have another part of the question to ask, we can always ask. In the Spiritist teachings, we always say, as Patricia mentioned, that it's quite inevitable that when we talk about forgiveness, there is some spiritual element that we need to bring to the plate, because we already acknowledge that there are other forces playing a role in our relationships, and we talk about the suffering spirits, the earthbound spirits, the evil spirits. Some other people talk about Satan, but there's always that element that really plays a role, and it's quite inevitable not to mention it unless we are in a more academic environment or more business environment. Then you don't have too much room to go in that terminology. Right, Patricia?
Yes. And one other thought, too, is I think it's very important to recognize that being forgiving of someone doesn't mean that we allow them to continue to harm us or to put ourselves in harm's way. Forgiving isn't necessarily letting people just get away with whatever they want to do. Forgiveness is really something we do inside of our own hearts, and sometimes those that we are seeking to forgive or to forgive us are not willing to be a part of that. But we still put lines up. I think, too, an example is when Pope Paul had been shot or was almost shot, and he had he forgave his assailant, but he didn't suggest that he get out of jail. So there was still a limit to making sure that we are doing justice and protecting the innocent. One of the very important scriptures that we address is in Micah 6:8, which says, "What does the Lord God require of you but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God?" And in Ephesians 4:32, to forgive others as God through Jesus has forgiven you. But we really want to make sure that people are not continuing to put themselves in harm's way in the midst of forgiving people.
Exactly.
Let me add
go
one
ahead.
more thing to that, because I think Patty's bringing up an excellent point. To be more specific, we hear stories of women, say, for example, who've been abused by their father. And so when they hear someone say, well, you need to forgive your dad, then they think that, gee whiz, I got to just let him continue to do what he's been doing to me. And so there are two very major, significant points in regard to this. Number one is we can forgive in our heart, but not necessarily extend overtly the words of forgiveness, because those can be misinterpreted. They can be perceived by someone as saying, okay, you're letting me off the hook, and so I can just keep doing what I'm doing. And the other is it's important to enforce consequences, not necessarily out of revenge, but to enforce consequences for the good of that person. So for some people, going to jail may be important for their own well-being.
Jay, do you have any other a question to them?
Yeah, a question for you. There's it's been said that there's only two emotions out there, love and fear. So if forgiveness is love, so why is it so, how would you say, we make it so complicated when it's really actually quite simple? And just wonder why we make it so complicated. That's my question, because I did forgiveness thing with my dad too on a different level, and we have a great relationship now. And we always say that burying a hatchet, but I think we have to dismantle the hatchet, I think, too. And I just wondered about that. My question is that why does it make it so complicated?
Okay, Patricia Mack.
Yeah. Did it seem like in the midst of it sounds like in your forgiveness for your father, that there were different steps that were important, or sometimes even time? Sometimes time makes a difference, or different events that will trigger people to be able to move into a forgiveness mode and be more willing than other times.
What do you think, Jay?
Well, the thing is that I feel that I was actually at that time I was doing meditation, quite a bit of meditation, and just got to the point where it says I got to move on with life. I just wonder if do you ever talk about that? Do you ever talk to your clients or patients saying you got to move on with life, and that's the only way you can do it, and make that step. It's like make that commitment too. Is just I got to move on with life, and I really got to move on with life, and I got to say I got to forgive you for whatever that is, and do it with a heart aspect of love. I just wondered, do you talked about with your clients about that, or patients about that?
Yeah. Well, there was one. This is one client that I had came to me and had issues because her father had left her when she was a baby, and her mother had remarried, and she was very happy with her new father and her mother, and yet she was very sad all the time, and she really didn't participate in activities or be with friends, and she was really doing poorly academically in school. And she came to me and because of these issues, and when we were discussing it, I had her write a letter. And sometimes there are certain vehicles that seem to free people's spirits for some reason, to allow them to open themselves up to something different. And this particular student wrote a letter to her father, and I said, you can write whatever you want. You can say how much you are upset with him, or you love him, or you forgive him, or whatever you want, because we're not going to send it. You don't know where to send it, and we'll just put it in a file for you. And so she sat down, she wrote this long, beautiful letter and said how much she loved him and how much she missed him. And it was so ironic because after that one session, it was just like 1 hour, after that her grades went up. she began to be involved with activities. It was like something was released within her when someone else was listening to her in a safe situation, and she was able to write it down and put it in a file and file it away, literally. And that somehow that gave her the permission in her spirit to live life and fully.
Wow, that's amazing. Jay, we thank you again and again for being a Kardec Radio listener and participating. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
All right. So we are going to give a short break, and when we come back, Patricia and Mac, we have a question that was sent to us earlier this past week, and it's about people who want to know how they can get in contact with the Institute, what types of courses and workshops it is offered, and future perspectives after the break.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Would you like to liberate yourself from your life struggles or to find inner balance? The Inner Journey CD has 3 beautiful visualizations that will help you bring harmony to your life. As Joanna DeAngeli tells us to, live in a way that you leave enlightening footprints in your pathway as if they were stars pointing out the pathway to happiness. To find this CD, go to the bookstore on the Spiritist Society of Baltimore webpage, www.ssbaltimore.org. That is www.ssbaltimore.org, and start your inner journey today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit Mei, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
And now we return to our program.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, Peggy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Now we are here talking about the Forgiveness Institute, and we are here with the leaders of the Forgiveness Institute, Dr. Mac Harnden and Patricia Plumb, and they are here telling us about the process of forgiveness. In this process, it's not only about forgiving, but sometimes accepting forgiveness, because have you heard about the stories, Mac and Patricia, about people who were forgiven, but they have a hard time accepting that forgiveness or forgiving themselves?
Forgiving oneself, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Forgiving oneself sometimes is even more difficult than forgiving other people, and I think that's where we have to recognize how powerful our motivation for justice is. You know, when we realize that we're not perfect, we hurt people, we violate our own values, and we do that throughout our whole lives, and so we keep thinking, gee whiz, I'm not very good, and so you get down on yourself, and ultimately that can lead to depression and ultimately suicide.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think that's where the value of being involved in some type of therapeutic relationship is really critical, so you can have another person give it a different perspective. But it's a lifelong process, and I think that's where relationship with Jesus and trying to really recognize that God is willing to forgive us. And it's kind of ironic, if on one hand we believe that God created the world, and yet He's not powerful enough to forgive me, then it's kind of like a major contradiction there. And so therapy really becomes critical, I think, in order to help people kind of move through that and sustain that over a lifetime.
Exactly. And as you're saying this reminds me of one of the most powerful examples in spiritual pathway is the Apostle Paul, who had to learn to forgive himself after the atrocities he committed, though he had good intentions of being, faithful to the Mosaic law, but once he found out he was wrong, he had to learn to forgive himself to go through that beautiful pathway that transformed our society as he disseminated the teachings. Is that right?
That's a great example.
Very much so.
Yeah, and this year we want to share. We are celebrating 70 years of a Spiritist novel that was brought in through Chico Xavier. It's named Paul and Stephen, and it talks about, the journey. It's deeper than people imagine. That journey within he had to do to forgive himself, so he could then help people out. Right, Mac?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Bible has so many great stories. I think David, when he committed adultery with Bathsheba, and then he arranged to have Bathsheba's husband Uriah killed in battle, and just the horrible sin that he committed, and then for him to be able to, eventually forgive himself. One would have to wonder if he ever really did that, because he suffered so much after that.
Exactly. And he came around and kept going on his missionary route. And this is the beauty. Nobody needs to be perfect, but we need to transform ourselves. So right now, Patricia and Mac, we have here with us Kirsten DeMello, who is a part of Kardec Radio's team, and she would like to talk to the two of you. Hi, Kirsten. Thank you for being with us today again.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for having me, and hello to Patricia and Mac as well. It truly is very inspiring listening to all of you today. I wanted to make a comment in the light of Spiritism, really, when Vanessa was talking about the book Paul and Stephen that was written, psychographed by the Spiritist medium Chico Xavier. There's also another book that he psychographed. It's called 50 Years Later. It entails in part the story of the Roman times and about the Christian martyrs, and it's very beautiful, and you actually can purchase this book online. It is in English at edusaveamerica.com. But what's most interesting, it really applies to what everyone is talking about today on this show about this idea of the ultimate forgiveness. And in the story, I don't want to give it too much away, but there's a part in the story where one of the Christian martyrs, his name is Silas, and he's the son of another martyr as well. And it's very beautiful when we go and we see the forgiveness, not only of him, but of all the martyrs that are in the amphitheater. And it's so beautiful, this scene that is narrated by Emmanuel, the spirit who's dictating the book. And he says that the Romans are all gearing up to watch in festivities, the death of the martyrs. But all of a sudden, much to their chagrin, they all of a sudden hear this beautiful song that all of 20-some martyrs that were left after they decided to not kill some of the actual Roman Christians, they began to hear this beautiful song. The entire amphitheater was filled, and part of the song was talking about forgiving. If you allow me, I'll just quote. It says, "Lord, forgive the torturers of your holy doctrine. Protect, sustain, and uphold those who are dying in evil." So it's so beautiful. Even as they were dying, not only were they remembering Christ, but they were also, the same as when Christ died, at Calvary, and he asked for forgiveness of those who persecuted him. The same the martyrs at that time were doing. So it's really interesting, this total and absolute forgiveness as they were being killed horrendously and horrifically. Not at all what we have to deal with today, but it's just something inspiring for us to share with everyone.
Exactly. Thank you, Kirsten. Patricia,
Thank
you. Yeah.
Well, the story of Stephen, when he asked God to forgive those that were stoning him, and then, like you mentioned, the ones in the Colosseum in Rome. When you think about that, compared to kinds of wrongs that most of us try to grapple with, it seems so minor.
Yeah.
Well, I think, too, of Jesus on the cross when he said, ask the Lord Lord God, his God, to forgive them for they know not what they do, that in many ways that is also a way that he in some ways reframed all of the ways that people sin against God, was recognize that somehow that we in our humanness are really inadequate to be able to be loving sometimes because we don't know how, or how to be, or how to change our hearts or our souls, and how important it is for us to recognize that he died for us and that his Holy Spirit can live in us and change us so that his love permeates us more than our own human nature.
Exactly. And as Kirsten brought to us the attention to these extreme cases of forgiveness, now we can tell the listener, we can learn to forgive, but how do we learn it? Mac told us about the steps: awareness, owning the anger, getting information, reframing. But if today there is a listener who is out there and realizes, I need to learn to be more forgiving, how can they receive help from the Institute?
Well, I still think one of the best books on forgiveness was written by Lewis Smedes. It was actually published in 1984. The title is Forgive and Forget. Now, he's not an advocate of forgetting, because as you pointed out earlier in the show, we really don't want to forget, because if we forget, we then become susceptible to falling back into the same unhealthy relationships. But I still think that's one of the best books. Another book that was actually published in 1977 was entitled Healing Life's Hurts, Healing Memories Through the 5 Stages of Forgiveness. And the stages that I shared with you are very similar to the stages that they advocate, which are similar to the 5 stages of death and dying that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross kind of promoted. And that's also a really great book. And then if you want to look at it from a more international perspective, what can we do to try to reconcile, the perpetual hostility, say, for example, in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Don Shriver wrote a book entitled An Ethic for Enemies, Forgiveness, and Politics. And I think it was published in 1995. And Don Shriver is one of the real great thinkers of our time in terms of the application of forgiveness on a much larger scale. So reading certain books, there is an article that Charlotte Roseneck and I published that basically goes into more depth regarding these steps. And whoever might be listening would like to get a copy of this, I'm more than happy to send it to them.
Mm-hmm.
We may want to. Oh, excuse me, Mac. I was going to say we may want to give them our Gmail for the Forgiveness Institute so they could ask for that.
Yeah, why don't you go and give that.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't mean to interrupt. So, but the email address for our Forgiveness Institute, and I would suggest too that if you have some particular subject or whatnot too that you might put in their response, maybe on the Kardec Radio or whatnot, to let us know that it's a legitimate email coming in, because sometimes spam happens. But so the email address is the Forgiveness FORGIVENESS Institute INSTITUTE and then 154 at gmail.com. So it's the Forgiveness Institute 154 at gmail.com. We'd be glad to address any of those specific issues or send you references, etc.
That's great. That's wonderful. That's very empowering. I think for people also who are listening to the show on demand later on, they can get to the email address and send to the Forgiveness Institute 154 at gmail.com. And are there other perspectives of events that are being organized in that regard through the Institute? What are the plans of the Institute for this the years to come?
Vanessa, let me just give them a phone number too if they want to call.
Sure.
913-608-2441. That's my number, and I'd be happy to respond to anybody as well. We don't have anything in stone at this point. There are two potentials that we hope could develop here in the next 2 years. One is that we would like to still have a conference on the subject of mercy, which we believe is very highly related to forgiveness. And if people wanted to go to the mercyconference.org, they could take a look at what we actually had hoped to develop this year. It's not going to happen, but at least they have an idea of what that would look like. If there's any organization would want to co-sponsor that with us, we'd be more than happy to do it, because the speakers that we have listed on that website certainly are willing to participate. It's called mercyconference.org. And then secondly, the Templeton Foundation has funded $3 million of research on the subject of generosity. It's overseen by the University of Notre Dame, and I am having a meeting next Thursday, August the 30th, with one of the researchers, actually two of the researchers that are involved in this Templeton Foundation research project. It's called the Science of Generosity. And your listeners can go to the Science of Generosity in Google, and they can find out more about that research. And so one of our hopes is that we can maybe partner with some of those researchers to have a conference in the future on the relationship between forgiveness and interpersonal generosity. But unfortunately, we don't have anything that's set with a specific date at this point.
Well, you already laid out a lot of plans there, so things are really happening, and we want to recommend to people again the Forgiveness Institute 154@gmail.com, and the phone number directly to Dr. Mac Herndon 913-608-2441, and Patricia Plumb is there available as well. And these and much more. And count on us at Kardec Radio and the Spiritist Magazine as well, because we can certainly, co-sponsor, or we can also, spread the news about these great ideas, great events, because as you know, and you said at the very beginning, everything begins with awareness, right? It's the first step.
That's correct. That's right.
All right. You're bringing good news to us, and I think we are the listeners, like Josara Korngold, who is the Vice President of the United States Spiritist Council. She's here together with the President of the United States Spiritist Council, Mauricio Filho, and Josara just commented that she's enjoying the show tremendously. I think this is another way for us to spread the news that forgiveness is something we can learn, and we shall learn to build a better world. Patricia, you're going to say something.
Yes, thank you so much for having us on your show, and we really look forward to corresponding with you and others in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I might conclude by asking a question and then giving a very simple answer. The question is, why can't I forgive? And the answer is, it's because it is so hard. Forgiveness, I think, is life's greatest challenge, to tell you the truth. And when we've been deeply hurt, it is. And so when Jay talked about, well, why is it so complicated? Well, on one hand, it's pretty simple. On the other hand, because it's so hard, we're so resistant in our human spirit to do it, that it does become complicated. But ultimately, it is the most freeing experience we can have on the planet if we can free ourselves from, that motivation to get even, to kind of get angry with people. But the answer to the question, why can't I forgive, is because it is so hard. And then the PS to it is, but it's worth it.
Exactly.
It's worth the struggle.
Yeah. And it's something that is needed, and we cannot postpone it, because even though people postpone and after 20 years they found out it's killing them, what do you do with those 20 years that you were poisoning yourself in relationships, in your life, etc.? You're just postponing happiness after all, right?
Exactly. That's well put.
Yeah, so it's a great joy, and we have to thank also Dr. Mark Baker, wherever he is today in California or in his trips, for putting us together, because it was through that amazing encounter at the United States Spiritist Symposium in Atlanta that we got to know of you, Mac, and now through you we got to know Patricia. We commend you for this amazing initiative, and we are here to collaborate in whatever possible way, sharing the news and whatever else. So the mission of the Institute goes always another mile. Thank you so much for being with us today as well.
Thank you, Vanessa. We sure wish you, and God bless you.
All right, you too. Thank you, Patricia. So, dear listener, I hope you're feeling as excited as we are, as joyful as we are, because when we talk about forgiveness, do you feel that your hearts are lighter? Because that's how we feel as well. It's so much easier. Jesus said, my pathway is light, is easy. It's harder to stay with our hearts closed with grudges, with hatred. So how about, think about it, we need to teach people. Jesus was great master, and his lessons were beyond words, and he really is inviting us through his own pathway to follow on his footsteps, because life is going to become much easier, much more enlightening, much more inspirational. And if you're out there and you're, working on this pathway, share it with others. As he said, do not keep the light only for yourself. Multiply it. And we have also here with us present Francisca Kranz, who is also one of Kardec Radio's team members and also a correspondent for the Spiritist magazine. And she's here with us saying that she agrees with Josiah Korngold, in which this show has been great and uplifting. So, dear listener, there's much more. Now, as we open for the break, we want to share with you something people have never listened before, a music that was put together by the renowned James Marotta. He's from Brazil, put a road to peace music. Let us listen to this as we go for the break. When we come back, we have beautiful segments to share with you, and at the end of the show, beautiful prayers so we can forgive more easily.
Gotta be now, there's no other way. of love among us. Happiness, hope, understanding, and truth is the kingdom of love among us. Among us.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit Mei, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.edicofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday, live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of the Spirit's Book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. Spiritism for Everyone meets every Wednesday evening and Saturday morning using the latest technology in web conferencing. You can join in from any computer in the comfort of your home or office, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is open, free, and requires no registration. To access the web live meetings, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we just heard about the Forgiveness Institute. I'm feeling lighter. Are you as well? I tell you, as we talk about it, we already feel better. And that's what science, and especially neuroscience, neuropsychology is showing to us, that when we elaborate our emotions, we really feel better. And Mauricio Filho just wrote to us here at Kardec Radio that he really enjoyed. It's a truly wonderful topic, and Kardec Radio is great. Mauricio, thank you so much for your support and for being here with us. You know, to talk about forgiveness, we need forgiveness because who knows? We all make mistakes, and Jesus said we cannot judge. As in the passages of Jesus, when the adulterous woman was brought in, he was setting new standard. He was telling, let us not judge, because as Dr. Herdman has said, you don't know the background of the person. We don't know how this person was raised and the tendencies. So really, even neuroscience, Dr. Michael Gazzaniga, who is one of the leading neuroscientists in the world today. I remember years ago coming to one of his conferences, and now he's working on this new field of neuroscience and law. It's about how do we understand the brain of criminals, for example. If they are already impaired, are they going to be judged in the same way? Because their perception of the world, of themselves, their cognition is disabled, is impaired, so they don't know. That's why Jesus said, forgive them because they don't know what they are doing. And if people knew it, they wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have been there. And it is on people who think they are healthier to really be forgiving. And not forgiving just in words, but in attitude. Just like the beautiful case, true case, of Chico Xavier. When he had a dog, and he loved the dog, but, you know, the dog was getting older, was sick, and the neighbor, who was a lady, she saw Chico Xavier so busy helping people and working day and night and day, she thought the dog was being a burden in Chico Xavier's life, and she decided to poison the dog so it would be less of a burden to Chico Xavier. She never heard Chico Xavier saying that the dog was a burden, but she concluded he was, and she wanted to help. So it was a twisted way of helping Chico Xavier. And when he got to know, he got upset, but he didn't. He was a very peaceful mind, but he felt resentful. And one day his spirit mentor, Emmanuel, the author of the book that Kirsten DeMello was talking about 50 years ago, and also the author of the book Paul and Stephen that is completing 70 years this year, he came to him and said, Chico, this resentment inside of your heart is blocking you from really being a good instrument for us and for living a better life. Get rid of it. And he said, as Dr. Hardin and Patricia Plum were telling us today, we don't know. Nobody teaches us. They just tell, forgive. But how do we forgive? We don't know. So then Chico Xavier came along and said, okay, how do I forgive? He asked the question. And then Emmanuel said, I'm going to teach you, but you have to follow through. He was very disciplined. He really followed through. And it's quite amazing, the road of forgiveness that he had to walk, because Emmanuel said, well, the first step to forgive is to give something that this neighbor of yours really dreams about. And he said, really? But she did that. He said, well, I'm teaching you to forgive her. You need to give her something that is really going to be a memorable experience for her. Well, he didn't have financial conditions, but he found out that she wanted very much. She dreamed day and night about the sewing machine. And Chico Xavier didn't have money, but he saved money and bought her a sewing machine, knocked her on the door, and gave the sewing machine to her as a gift. When she saw the gift, she was mesmerized by it. She was so happy and joyful that she hugged Chico Xavier, much like in the Brazilian way, hugged him deeply and expressed her gratitude. And when he left, going back to his house, he observed that he felt lighter deep in his heart. So Emmanuel came along and said, how does it feel, Chico? He said, well, pretty good. I don't know why, but I really feel better and lighter. What happened? And that's when Emmanuel explained. It's about vibration. It's energy. It's about the spiritual fluid. He said, when she hugged you, she was emitting these vibrations of gratitude, and gratitude really deleted, erased from your heart the resentment that you're still holding on. There you have it, dear listener. Something that may seem quite puzzling, but a real account, something quite unique. Forgiveness that can be conquered by conquering gratitude from others. Something we need to experience and probably need a lot of research in the material plane to know more about it. But as we are talking about forgiveness, let us talk about forgiveness in one pathway that can be quite difficult. Let us talk about forgiveness in marriage and also in divorce, because it's not easy. Very soon, on September 8th, we're going to have a beautiful conversation with the best-selling author on relationship, Dr. John Gray. He's going to be here with us talking about his beautiful work on how to heal relationships and also how to find healing after divorce. It's about the author of the book, Women Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars. Are they really from the places? And he is an amazing mind. He's going to be here with us in a few weeks to talk about it. And now we're going to share with you the segment by Dr. Marco Magalhães in Spiritism for You, exactly about the topic, marriage and forgiveness. Let us listen about this, and soon after, Kirsten DeMello is going to share with us about the responsibility in prayer.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listener. Welcome to our segment, Spiritism in Your Life. Today we're going to be talking about marriage, and we're going to give a new statistical data on marriages and divorces in the United States. And we're going to bring relevant information from the Spiritist point of view on the marriage and the divorce. As the Spirits answer Allan Kardec in question 695 in the Spirit's book, marriage is progress in the evolution of humankind. And of course, marriage itself has evolved over time, as we can see by the many different types of marriages recorded in history. And actually, marriage itself predates recorded history because it's been part of the evolution of human beings for a long, long time. As the Spirits answer again Allan Kardec in question 696, what effect would abolishing marriage have on human society? And the Spirits answer, a return to the life of the animals. The free and fortuitous union of the sexes belongs to the state of nature. Marriage is one of the primary acts of progress in human society because it establishes fraternal solidarity and may be found among all cultures, though under the most diverse expressions. Abolishing marriage would therefore be a return to humankind's infancy and would place them even below some animals that demonstrate examples of stable unions. Let us now have a look on the most recent report regarding statistical data on marriage and divorces in the United States. In a recent report by the National Health Statistics Report from March 2012, the authors, Koppen et al., showed that the percentage of women who were currently cohabiting rose from 3% in 1982 to 11% in 2010. And this increase is associated with a decrease of women who are actually currently married. So we can see from this trend that the characteristics of stable unions are changing from a formal marriage to cohabitation and common law unions. Another very important data from this report is that looking at 20 years, the probability that the first marriages of women and men will survive was approximately 52% for women and 56% for men in 2010, showing that approximately half of the marriages will actually end in divorce within 20 years. Another very interesting data from this report is that women with a bachelor degree or higher were less likely to be currently cohabiting and were more likely to be currently married for the first time compared with women with less education. Women with a bachelor's degree also had a higher probability of their first marriage lasting 20 years compared with a woman who had some college or high school diploma. These are just summaries of the data regarding our currently statistics on marriages and divorces in the United States. And if we can sum up all the information together, what we see nowadays is that people are getting divorced more often. And people are now changing some of the concepts regarding marriage and seeking other alternatives, including living together and having different relationships instead of having a formal marriage. What's important to mention now is that that characteristic does not contradict what we understand as the evolution of marriage. It just shows different trends in our society. Now, considering this Spiritist point of view on this matter, many times we face this confusion regarding the indissolubility of marriage as it is described in several passages in the Bible. We can now go back to the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 22. As Allan Kardec mentioned to us, divorce is a human law with the purpose of legally separating what is already separated in fact. It is not contrary to God's law, since it merely reforms what humans have stipulated and is applicable only in cases in which the divine law has not been taken into account. And it continues, the civil law is meant to regulate social relationships and family interests in accordance with the requirements of civilization. This is why it is useful and necessary, but variable. as we can see from the data that we've just collected from this report. And Allan Kardec continues, it must be provident because civilized human beings cannot live like primitives. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prevents it from being a corollary of the divine law. We can now summarize all the information we discussed today. The message that we want to leave with you guys today is very simple. All the complications arising from the topic regarding the Spiritist point of view, or I would say the religious point of view on marriage, and the civil law point of view, is that people forget that these are two completely different laws. Human laws are a poor reflection of the divine laws, and of course are subject to change all the time. Marriage in our society is changing, and the laws, of course, have to follow the evolution of our society. But the divine laws that actually are immutable, and they are the ones that regulate our evolution, they never change. There are many different kinds of marriages, and they all share the same essence, that mutual affection of the spouses is extended to their children, and there should be two instead of one to love them, care for them, and enable them to progress. Some marriages happen because we are expiating previous existences. In other situations, a spirit is trying to help another spirit who is less evolved. In other situations, the spirits that already have a long-time relationship bound by the law of love also can continue their mission while incarnated and living together, married. These unions cannot be separated because they are actually bound by the immutable laws of God and not according to the changeable law of human beings. This is the message we want to leave today. And another important thing that we want to mention to all you listeners is that if you have any topics or anything that you want to have discussed here in our segment, please go to our website, KardecRadio.com, and send us a message. Thank you very much again, my friends, for spending this time with us. And remember the message that Jesus brought to us. Love one another. May God bless us all.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners, and welcome back to the Spiritist Moment, where we enjoy studying about Spiritism, Kardec, and of course, Christ himself. We give continuation this week on part 3 of the Spirit's book, the study about prayer. Now, did we know that we have a duty to pray for others? Do we know, as the Spirits tell us in question 664, that we are culpable if we do not pray for those who are in most need? So are we aware that if we come across someone in our lives, perhaps we're watching TV, perhaps we come across someone at work, on the street, and we see that they're in need, do we know that we, according to question 664, are held accountable for the prayers that we do or not do for those who are in need? Let us think about it in question 664, when the question is posed that is it any use praying for the dead and for suffering spirits? And if so, how can our prayers provide them consolation and shorten their sufferings? Do our prayers have the power to appease the justice of God? Once again, the Spirits let us know that our prayer, and we quote, has no effect in changing the designs of God, but the soul of whom you pray experiences relief because it witnesses the interest you show in it. Wow. And they go on, dear friends. We recommend you go and read. It's a very long answer, but something for us to think about. The responsibility we have amongst one another, Spiritist or non-Spiritist, it doesn't matter, because here in the question 664, they do not specify that we should only pray for other Spiritists or whomever, but for humanity, if we ever come across. And let us think about that. Throughout our day, do we ever encounter anyone who's suffering, whether it's a co-worker who may be going through just some simple, small problems, or at least according to our perspective, or perhaps someone who's homeless on the street, or perhaps we're watching the news, come across something that's sad? Do we stop to pray for that person? And do we know that we have a responsibility before God to pray for them? Let us contemplate these thoughts, dear friends, because Spiritism once again brings us to the reality of the responsibilities we have amongst one another as a humanity. And we go to question 665, and it's asked of the noble spirits, what is to be thought of the opinion that rejects praying for the dead because it is not prescribed in the Gospels? And we seek here, dear friends, to simply paraphrase the answer of the spirits and what they say. And they tell us what Jesus said many centuries ago, that we must love one another. And in praying for one another, we are fulfilling that recommendation and that law that we must love one another. And also, the spirits tell us to demonstrate affection for others also is implied here. And how sweet and consoling when the spirits tell us that those to whom we pray for perhaps cannot be taken out of their suffering because sometimes they must learn certain things, but that they are comforted by our words. And this is demonstrated in the book Violets on the Window that was psychographed by a Brazilian spiritist medium, Vera Lucio Marinzek. And the story entails, and we won't share everything because we go and recommend you to purchase this book probably at Amazon.com. It is already translated in English, and it tells about the prayers of people that are heard by Patricia, who is a discarnated young woman, the prayers that are heard from her parents that encourage her to accept the new life. And it's very beautiful, dear friends, because inasmuch as she hears the prayers, others also can hear our prayers. Let us think about the great charity we can do in a simple prayer that doesn't need to be so long or illustrious, just simple, humble, and from the heart, desiring that our brother or sister, or perhaps somebody we don't even know, we just wish them well. We see that they are suffering, and that there is real responsibility in that. Let us contemplate these thoughts, dear friends, responsibility that we have in praying, not just for ourselves and our own family, but those whom we don't even know about, those who we hear about on the news, those that are suffering. Whether they are guilty or not, it's not for us to judge, but simply to offer consolation. As our Master Jesus came and showed us the same, he was always benevolent and kind to all those, ones who made mistakes and ones who did not. Everyone who crossed his path, he was kind. And let us emulate his behavior with our current divine teachings of Spiritism. And as always, dear friends, we wish you many blessings.
We will return to our program after these messages.
For the first time ever, the book Between Heaven and Earth by the spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is now in English. This is a novel that offers information about the relationship that exists in the activities of the spirit on the two planes of life. Purchase your copy today at www.edysayofamerica.com.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.edysayofamerica.com today. The International Spiritist Council is organizing and promoting the 7th World Spiritist Congress, which will be held in Havana, Cuba on March 23rd through the 25th of 2013. The Congress theme will be Charity and Spiritual Education in Building a World of Peace. 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism. For more information, please visit www.7cem.org.
Good morning, dear Kardec Radio listener. Welcome to one more program of God at Home. I am Naur Fonseca.
And I am Gabi Ferreira. Today's lesson is number 24, entitled The Signs of a Renewal, from the book Jesus in the Home by the Spirit Neo Lucio and psychographed by Chico Xavier.
Every week in our show, we have the opportunity to have Jesus as a guest in our homes. Let's try to imagine what that really means. Jesus was no ordinary man. According to the Spirit who dictated the Spirit's book, Jesus is the most perfect Spirit that has ever lived on earth. That means that no one was above him. No one knows more than him. Now, we know that God must create all spirits equal because God is just. So the fact that Jesus is the most perfect Spirit also means that he is the most experienced, who has traveled longer in the evolutionary journey. In other planets, some less and others more advanced than our planet Earth. He said it himself in a dialogue with Pilate, as we can find in the Gospel according to Spiritism in chapter 2.
Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." Then Pilate said, "So you are a king." Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, to testify the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me."
So wouldn't you be curious to know what Jesus has to say about the future of earth? What expects us? So let's hear.
At the household gathering, the Master began to speak persuasively.
When the divine kingdom is at the gates of humankind, the soul of the world will be renewed. The person who is the most powerful will not be the one who is the most ruthless, but rather the one who loves the most. Conquerors will not be those who war against foreign enemies to the death in rivers of blood, but rather those who combat the iniquity and ignorance that lies within them until evil is wiped out in the realms of their own nature. The most eloquent will not be those of the most beautiful speech, but rather those who combine holy words with actions to raise the quality of life wherever they may be. The noblest will not be those who hold the largest number of titles, granting them the transitory control of ephemeral lands on earth, but those who most intensely accrue the acclaims of love and gratitude in the hearts of mothers and children, the sick and the elderly, loyal and honest persons, hard-working and upright persons, and humble and kind ones. Those who are the most respected will not be dispensers of gold and armed might, but rather those with the purest hearts. Those who are the most knowledgeable will not be the ones who have the most books and theories, but the ones who, even though they know little, try to light a lamp in the darkness that still envelops their closest neighbor.
The divine friend rested his lucid eyes on the clear night that was shining outside in the heart of nature, made a long pause, and emphasized,
"In that sublime age, people will not leave homes to war in storms of blood and tears against their neighbors, due to their desire of conquest or race hatred, because they will be busy waging war against the darkness of ignorance, the open wounds of illness, the anguish of hunger, and moral torture of all hues. When the plow replaces the opulent chariot of victors in public displays of collective grandeur, when the edifying books takes the place of the sword in the minds of the people, when goodness and wisdom preside over human competition so that good individuals may be revered, when personal sacrifice on behalf of all constitutes the true honor of individuality so that peace and love do not lose their place in one's life, then there will be a new humanity in the luminous cradle of the divine kingdom."
At this point, the sweet and sovereign word made a slight pause, and there outside, in the warmth of the calm night, the resplendent stars sparkling high in the sky seem to extol the distant era.
Let's think about this message and start today to build this new humanity within ourselves.
Dear listener, it's a beautiful show. A lot of hope because Jesus said, I came here to share good news. And the good news of God. We are leading our pathway to God, and we need to lead our children also to God. That's why next Saturday, you're invited to join us again as we're dedicating the whole program to how we can teach Spiritism, spirituality to kids, and whom we're going to interview, our very Bernadette Leal. She has been doing beautiful segments here for Kardec Radio. She has been doing great work with the United States Spiritist Council and also helping with the Spiritist magazine by publishing the articles to teach parents and educators on how to talk about these beautiful things and share with them, with our children. She's going to be here with us next Saturday. Don't miss it. If you have a question or a suggestion, come and tell us now. Now, we want to share with you that the Spiritist magazine is now available, not only freely, digitally speaking, but also available for you to print in a beautiful partnership with HP Mag Cloud. Go to our website, spiritistmagazine.com, get to know more about it, or directly at hpmagcloud.com and print it out. Of course, we cannot offer you the Spiritist magazine at $5 per issue because we have a partner now, and he's charging us the much that they need to charge to print, single issues. But, $10, $9, it's worthwhile reading the magazine and sharing the news. And if you are a Spiritist organization or an organization out there and you want to print a magazine, it's simple. They give you discounts, 25% discount if you print 20 magazines or more. If you want more discount, I encourage you to call them, and the customer service of HP Mag Cloud will do the deal for you, and we can help you in whatever possible way. This is what we can do for now, but we hope you enjoy. I have the printed version, and I tell you, it's not to miss. I can bring you places. We can also read it in our tablets, laptops, iPhones, iPads, etc., but having the printed form is also another way for people to see it, and it's also a way for you to distribute and be a multiplier of the teachings. Now, as we're talking about forgiveness, we're going to pay a strong tribute to the King of Forgiveness, Jesus. Jesus is the Master, the unique Lord of Forgiveness as a divine Messiah. And to recall his coming, because Spiritism is bringing Jesus back again to us without restrictions, without limitations, without sectarianism. He's here with us again. And to feel it's more than words, let us listen to this beautiful song that was written by James Moroder, published in the Spiritist magazine in its lyrics, and you can listen to it now. It's the coming of Jesus in that very holy night.
Holy night.
generation, dear listener, we invite you now for the final prayer here at Kardec Radio. It's the prayer to ask for strength so we can learn to forgive. And in the Gospel According to Spiritism, Chapter 28 is a collection of Spiritist prayers, and there we have different prayers for the hardest times in our lives. Kardec was such a visionary mind, such an educational mind, that he brought it to us to teach us also to pray, and to pray in the extreme moments of our lives. As he says, to pray during life's afflictions. Many people say, I cannot pray because I feel so angry at that person. I cannot pray for that person. Well, pray for yourself. So that's why right now we're going to use that prayer. It's item 27 in chapter 28 of the Gospel According to Spiritism, and you can buy it in ebook format or in paperback at odysseyofamerica.com. Here we are. Let us pray so we'll learn to forgive. And there is always another level of forgiveness. Almighty God, who sees our misery, deign to listen favorably to the pleas I send you at this moment. I ask for forgiveness, to learn to forgive, and if my request is inappropriate, please forgive me. If it is just and useful in your sight, may Good Spirit, who carry out your will, come to my aid for its fulfillment, because I want to learn about forgiveness. Whatever may come my way, dear God, may your will be done. If my desires are not heeded, it is because it is within your designs to test me, and I submit myself without complaint. Enable me not to become discouraged by this, and may neither my faith nor my resignation be shaken. I ask you, dear Lord, to learn greater ways of forgiving. May everyone whom I hold grudges in my heart be released. May they feel the happiness of your blessings, as we're all children of God. Dear listener, we hope that you feel a lighter heart today and share this with others, because Kardec Radio is here to nourish your soul, all of our souls. Next week when we come back, it's all about spirituality for kids. Come back. Bernadette Leal is going to enjoy and release a lot of joy for all of us in how we can teach good news to our children. For now, many blessings to you and all of the ones in your life.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.